What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Just wanted to remind you guys to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you end up enjoying this video, and if you're enjoying the daily uploads. If we could get to 1,000 likes on all these regular videos, I think that's a pretty good spot to aim for. When you do these things, it really helps the channel to grow and ensure that I can keep making these videos daily for a long time to come. If you guys have any thoughts about the stories in these videos, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite parts about making these videos is hearing your guys' thoughts about the stories therein. Without further ado, I will let you guys enjoy the next hour or so of true scary stories, and I will see you guys again at the end of the video. This happened just a few months ago. For a little bit of background, I graduated college 3 years ago. I hadn't been to the library in some time. I went back this past summer. It had probably been a little over a year since the last time I had been there. I needed to go to print off a couple of documents. I was starting a new job and did not have a printer at my apartment. I went to the library that was only about 5 minutes away. When I got inside, things were very quiet. There were not a whole lot of people in there. I found the computer lab area relatively quickly. They had a couple of printers that you could use. The library probably had about 20 computers, and 3 other people were scattered about here and there. I sat down at one, not really by anyone else, and logged on. I wasn't going to be there for a very long time. I went to locate the things I needed to print out. After 2 minutes of being there, though, a random man sat right at the computer next to me. This was a little bit strange. There was all this open space around us with no other people nearby. It didn't really bother me too much, though. In fact, I tried to pay it no mind at all. I was focused on the task at hand and knew I would only be there for about 5 more minutes. After a minute or so of sitting down, the man leaned over into me and said hello. I said hi back to him. He looked to be about 20 years older than I was. So, hey, you doing some kind of school project or something? I said no. I had graduated from school already and just had to print out some things for work. The guy said okay, but I could tell he was just staring at me. It seemed a little bit odd, not too big of a deal though. Finally, I was able to print off what I needed a couple of minutes later. When I heard the printer start up, I logged off the computer, then got up and walked over to the printer. I grabbed up my documents and put them in my folder. As I was doing this, I saw the man stand up from his computer as well, as if he was going to leave. I just kind of thought, well, that's weird. Not much else, though. I left the library after. As I was walking out to my car, though, I noticed the man a ways behind me. This is when I felt like maybe something was up here. I was able to get to my car easily, and then I would be able to drive home when I was inside. I felt completely safe. I left the library lot and started driving home. It wouldn't take long to get back. Only a minute after pulling out of the library, though, I noticed the car behind me was the same man. I was stuck at a red light, and he pulled up right on my bumper. Because it was daytime, I was able to easily see it was him behind the wheel. I hoped that he would turn someplace else. I really thought, there's no way he's going to follow me home. But the closer I got to my apartment, the closer the guy remained driving behind me. I started to get really nervous. I wasn't sure what to do. My apartment was coming up soon. The turn for it came, and when I turned into my apartment complex, the man turned in right behind me. My apartment building is relatively big, and the parking lot is gated. You have to enter a code, and each resident has their own code. The apartment is not fancy or anything, but the security features are very nice. Now I was stopped at the place where you enter the code, with the guy right on my tail. I entered it and the gate began to open. I drove in, and the guy tried to drive in right behind me, like he was going to sneak in on my code. I drove just past the gate area, then slammed on my brakes so the man couldn't get in. I waited for the gate to close behind me. The guy didn't honk or react at all. The gate closed, leaving him stuck outside, and I started to drive forward and out of sight of the man. As I was doing so, I just so happened to see him turn around and leave. Obviously, he did not live here. I was able to get back safely, and luckily I haven't seen the guy ever since then. I still can't believe that he followed me home. Looking back, I'm really glad I did not let him into my apartment complex. Who knows what would have happened then? I worked at a 24/7 fast food restaurant a few years back. When I was in college, the job wasn't fun or enjoyable in any way, and most of my coworkers were middle-aged people with no personalities. I was doing school online, which meant I had more time to work, so I was cranking out 40 hours a week at least, and even got a promotion to shift lead after a few months. What I didn't realize when I took the promotion was that I was signing up to be officially a full-time employee. That meant they could make me work any shift. Not even a week into it, they put me as overnight, and I couldn't even argue. Overnights were a pain in the ass, because I'd be the only one there. If the drive-thru got backed up, then I'd be hustling non-stop without any breaks at all. On the flip side though, sometimes it would be completely dead, and I'd just be standing around all night on my phone. This was one of those nights. I was in the back of the kitchen, sitting on a pile of boxes and scrolling through my phone, just trying to pass the time away. That was when my headset rang to alert me a customer was in the drive-thru. I got up and went to the computer, then asked what they would like to order. Nobody said anything, so I turned and looked up at the drive-thru camera. The lane was empty. No cars were in the drive-thru, or even in the parking lot around the restaurant. The system never falsely beeps like that. There was a slight storm outside though, so maybe a raindrop or a flash of light had tripped the sensor somehow. I stayed by the drive-thru window for a few minutes, and my headset beeped again. This time I quickly looked up at the cameras and caught a man walking past the drive-thru lane. He was wearing a thick hoodie and a face covering as well. He quickly walked out of the camera's view. Where the restaurant was, there wasn't anywhere else he could have parked or walked from, unless he was walking on the side of the main road. I watched the cameras to see if he'd come back, but after 10 minutes of no activity, I went back to my phone. 15 more minutes went by before I got another beep. When I checked the cameras, the same man was there. This time he was just standing in the drive-thru lane. Excuse me, sir, can I help you?" After a moment, he started reciting an order for a small meal. I wasn't supposed to serve people in the drive-thru unless they were in a vehicle, so I told him I couldn't accept his order. He stood there, letting the rain soak him as he looked at the screen and didn't speak. I thought about telling him to leave, but I didn't want to escalate things if I didn't have to. I just waited. After a minute, he started walking down the drive-thru lane toward the side of the restaurant where the window was. I rushed over and latched the window shut. Not even a second later, the man appeared outside. He had his hood and mask still on. He looked to be in his late 40s, with a dead look in his eyes. He watched me through the window and stood outside like he was waiting for me to talk to him. And there was something about his look that really freaked me out and kept me from speaking. Then he softly said, "Open up." I nervously said no and stayed where I was. The man continued looking at me, then knocked on the window. After a few seconds, he turned and walked away. As he did so, a loud scraping sound ran along the side of the building. I checked the cameras to make sure he left, and luckily he did not come back. During the next hour of my shift, though, I was thinking about that scraping sound. I decided to take the trash to the dumpster and take a quick look on the side of the wall under the drive-thru window. There was a long scratch, looking like it was made by a knife dragging along the side of the building. I called the police after that, but the man couldn't be identified from the grainy camera footage mixed with the heavy rain and fog. The man never turned up again. I'll never know exactly what he was planning on doing that night, but seeing as he had a knife ready in hand, I assumed that had I taken his order and opened that window, that would have been the last thing I would have ever done. I used to work at a library not too far from where I lived. I worked there for a total of 2 years. The library that I worked at closed pretty late for a library. They were open from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. from Monday to Thursday. The rest of the week we closed earlier at 5 o'clock. I mostly just worked on weekdays though, and oftentimes in the evening. One night I was working a Thursday until closing. Things would usually be very quiet for the last several hours. During that time we would only have one employee working, which of course was me. The library was a little bit on the smaller side. It was just one level, and had just about everything you would want in a library still. On this night, it was very quiet like usual. I was by myself starting at 5 p.m. for the final 3 hours. During the 5 o'clock hour, a few people were there, but by 6 o'clock it was completely empty other than me. At least, that's what I'd thought at first. There was only one entrance and exit to the library, so it was very easy to tell when people would come and go. I was sitting behind my desk where you could check out books. From where I was, I could see a large area of the library, but not all of it. It was now dark outside and completely silent. That was always a little bit of a strange experience. At about 6:30, I was just sitting there when I began to hear a noise, what sounded like somebody walking through an aisle. There were obviously lots of bookshelves, so I couldn't see into most of the aisles. For a split second, I saw a man appear, walking from behind one bookshelf and behind another. He was tall, thin, wearing all black clothing. The most notable thing, though, was that he was wearing a strange alien mask. It was green and really creepy looking. I hadn't seen this guy before, so he must have put on his mask when he was already inside. I wasn't really quite sure what he was doing. Maybe some kind of prank or something? Nobody else seemed to be here, though. After he went behind another bookshelf, everything went silent again. He had been sort of far away from me. There was a little lounge area between where I was and the bookshelves. About 10 minutes went by. Then, just for a second, I saw him appear again. This time he came out of an aisle a ways away from where he was before. It was sort of creepy, seeing him pop up here and there. I thought about saying something to the man, but I didn't. For the next hour, I didn't see or hear from him at all. I was starting to worry, because we would be closing very shortly. I did not want to have to kick this guy out all by myself. I made the announcement over the library speakers that we'd be closing in 30 minutes. The guy didn't appear, though. All I heard was silence. About 5 minutes after that, I could see through a bookshelf that the man had pulled out a book and was staring through at me. I smiled, thinking it was a joke perhaps. When I saw he didn't move or react, though, I began to become uncomfortable. I looked away. A minute later, I looked back, and he was still there peeking through at me. This was really weird. I looked away again and focused on my computer screen for the next several minutes. The next time I looked over, he was gone. I gave the 15-minute warning that we would be closing soon. The man in the alien mask was the only person in the entire library beside me. I didn't see him for the rest of the time until we closed. I gave multiple more warnings on the speakers, and it was now 8 o'clock. just me and him inside. I really had no idea as to where he could be. I scanned my eyes around everything I could see, but I saw no trace of him. I hadn't heard anything either. It was so quiet in there that you could hear a pin dropping. I decided I needed to go find this guy and tell him we were now closed. I got up, and I'll admit, I was very nervous. I started at the front and made my way toward the back, going through every single aisle. Not long after starting, I heard a noise coming from the back section. I started walking in the direction I'd heard it from, but I still couldn't see the man. I called out asking if anybody was there and said we were now closed. I got nothing in response. As I looked from one shelf to another, I soon found myself toward the back of the library. I really had no idea where this guy could have gone. All of a sudden, I heard a book fall from a shelf closer to the front. It was a ways away. I moved over there, but I didn't see the man. I picked up the book and continued searching the library, covering every inch of the place. I even looked in the bathrooms and areas that were off limits to the public. I couldn't find him anywhere. I didn't hear any more noises either. Either he must have left, or this guy was getting really good at avoiding me. After staying long past what I planned to, I finally left for the night. I don't really know what the man was doing, but he really creeped me out. He literally stayed at the library for at least 3 hours, most of which he was the only person in there other than me. That was my creepiest experience working there. This happened when I was working part-time at a ramen restaurant. I first got that job when I was around 16 years old, during my early years as a high school student. This happened in my hometown of Kyoto, in the Shiga Prefecture. The ramen restaurant I worked in was inside a shopping department. I worked nearly every weekday after school, serving customers and operating the register. I would start at about 7 o'clock and work right up to midnight on most nights, cleaning and closing down usually. Opposite the register, there was a row of seats for anyone in the mall to use who needed to have a break. They were used by everyone, not just customers of our restaurant. My experience happened about a year and a half into working there, making me a 17-year-old at the time. I should also note that I'm a woman. On one of my shifts, my manager and coworker both approached me during a lull and asked me the following. "Hey, Erica, do you have any older friends around here?" I was a bit confused by their question, but I quickly responded with a simple no. I didn't want to be asked weird personal questions like that by my manager and coworkers. They were kind of shocked and shook their heads in what disagreement or surprise would be. I wasn't sure at the time. My manager said, "I see." I didn't know why they asked me such a random question. I didn't know what they were talking about at all. I went back to work and kind of shook it off. A few weeks went by when the coworker came up to me again. "Hey, Erica, why don't you go to the bathroom real quick and come back after a while, okay?" This was obviously weird. I stood there confused. The manager came over and I asked both of them what was going on, but neither of them would give me a proper answer. The manager simply said it was an experiment and told me to do it real quickly. I did what was asked and went back and forth from there in the bathroom. I didn't understand what the point of this so-called experiment would be, though. After going to the bathroom and standing there for a while, I came back to looks of concern on my coworker and manager's faces. My manager frowned and pulled me to the side. "I think you might be being followed by an older man." I couldn't really understand what they meant by that. I guess that was because I was young and a little bit naive. I hadn't experienced anything like that, so I couldn't really process why an older man would have any interest in following me. I asked them what was going on. The pair of them made a subtle glance across to the row of seats. I looked in that direction, and saw a random old man sitting there. He was looking our direction, but the instant he saw that I'd seen him, he snapped his head away. I had no idea who this guy was. I felt a little creeped out by his presence. He was certainly looking at me. I asked my coworkers why they thought he was following me. I mean, sitting outside of a restaurant is allowed. I didn't know what was going on, so I let them explain. Well, I started noticing that every time you're on shift, that guy always sits right over there, and he looks at you the whole time. When you leave work or get up and go, he gets up too and starts following you. Seems to me like he's stalking you. It really scared the heck out of me. Not quite like a ghost story or horror film, but something much more visceral. They say people are way scarier than fiction. I looked over at the man again. I wanted to make sure I was sure I didn't know him. I studied his face, and I was absolutely certain he was a stranger. I got a really weird feeling inside when I realized that. Kind of disgusted, kind of numb. After they told me that he'd been watching me, I just couldn't get it out of my mind while I worked. I spent my whole shift either looking over my shoulder or looking straight at him. I would make casual glances in an attempt to not make eye contact with him. When I left for home that night, the guys made sure they walked with me. Later, when I was alone though, I looked over my shoulder and saw the middle-aged creepy man was still following me from a distance. I realized in that moment that I really was being stalked. I got home just fine that night, but my God, was it nerve-wracking. I couldn't tell if the guy just happened to walk home the same way or if he was intending to follow me all the way to my place. I wasn't sure what was going on entirely. I couldn't just go off of what my coworkers' theories were. I mean, they were hardly detectives. I really didn't want to, but I decided to give the man who gave me the creeps the benefit of the doubt. My thoughts changed when I went back to work the following night, though, because the man was right back at it. It was clearly much more than just a coincidence. I went to the bathroom and noticed that he was waiting outside while I was in there. Later on my break, I needed to go to the convenience store, and when I left, I realized he followed behind me. He watched me go in, and to my surprise, he left after. I headed back to the restaurant and saw his familiar figure sat on the seat opposite my work area. He watched me return to the store and never took his eyes off me. I asked my coworker and manager to continue keeping an eye out for this weirdo. I didn't know what I should do. Chillingly, I heard one of my colleagues say that my new stalker was seen going into the same convenience store as me right after I left. Apparently, he bought the exact same things as me. He was taking an interest in all the magazines I picked up as well, and flipped through it all. It was all piling up on me. I felt like he was there from the moment I started my shift until the moment I finished. I didn't know what I could accuse him of, though. How much trouble would it bring me if I accused him and it wasn't taken seriously? I was so creeped out at this point that I began to resent going to work altogether. To the job I really enjoyed, I was beginning to feel frightened more and more regularly. My manager picked up on how anxious the man made me and went to the security guard with a complaint about the man. The security guard went over to the creepy guy and made a big scene, then moved him on. It worked though, and it started working fast because in a matter of moments, the man was gone. He power walked away from the row of seats while his face turned bright red from being caught. I was really relieved. My relief was short-lived though. A few days later, the man was right back and up to his same old tricks. He was watching me and following me again. My manager started getting really angry at this guy. He stormed over to the security guard of our department store and told him to tell that man he was not allowed to return. If he tried to come back, we would be filing a police report. The security guard went right on over to the creep, who was sat on the seats opposite our restaurant. He gave him that strong warning, and once again the guy got up and stormed out, as if he had been embarrassed somehow. I hoped he would really learn this time around. I hoped the threat of a police report might have done the job. We all felt confident he would not be back again. And for the first time in a long while, it was quite the enjoyable shift for me. I was able to work with peace of mind until closing time. I can't tell you how nice it was to glance up from the register and not see him watching me. When everything closed down for the evening, it was time to head home. Little did I know my journey home that night was going to be much more memorable than usual. I headed to the underground parking lot to get my vehicle. It was always dark down there, especially when I got off the late night shift. I unlocked my bike and hopped on. I went to push off to get going, but for some reason my bike wouldn't move. I tried to push off again and nothing happened. I didn't know what was wrong with it. I didn't need this on top of all that was going on at work. I turned to see if my back wheel was caught on something, and that was the moment when I faced my stalker eye to eye. He was standing there, both hands wrapped tightly around my back tire, preventing me from leaving. It was terrifying. It seemed as if he literally had stepped out of the shadows. I had no idea he was even in the underground lot with me. I was so scared. I couldn't make a sound. I tried to push off again. I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. Nothing was working. It was at that point I realized he was muttering something. He was saying, "Why? Why?" over and over again. Something like that. I don't know why, but something about that kind of changed me at that point, like a switch that needed to be flipped was. I exchanged my fear for anger. I turned around and started screaming at him. "What do you think you're doing? Let go of my bike!" I didn't expect him to snap back at me with a, "Why did you do that? Why did you say you were going to the police? What on earth were you thinking?" His words really creeped me out, even beyond how he'd been behaving up until that point. I think it was because it was all so one-sided. It was all about him, and not the trouble he'd been causing me. "Look, you're scaring me. Let go right now," I said. I knew that embarrassment seemed to work on him before, so I tried to make him feel embarrassed again. He snapped right back at me in a louder voice, saying, "I never put my hands on you. Are you kidding me? You called the cops just because I looked at you?" Luckily, our heated exchange of words had alerted a mall security guard to come rushing over. As soon as that creep noticed security was coming his way, he bolted off and ran, with his tail tucked between his legs. After that encounter, my manager demanded police patrols around the area to make sure that if the guy showed up again, he would be met with the police. Even though cops were walking about the mall, I couldn't help but think he would show up at any moment while I was working. I began to get super anxious whenever anyone would look my way for more than a second or two. I was growing more and more paranoid by the day. I had to leave that job in the end and got into a university hundreds of miles away. I'm glad I left that area, to be honest. One thing I still have trouble getting over all these years later is the fact he was so angry at me for daring to report his behavior. I caught a glimpse of his sociopathic world, a man with no ethics or empathy, a man who said this to a 17-year-old girl who was scared and tired of being followed by him. His excuse was that he never put his hands on me. Are you kidding me? He knew what he was doing. He knew when to leave when the security guard came. He knew he had to hide from police presence in the mall. He knew how to gaslight and try to manipulate me into believing I was going to be in the wrong for reporting him. All I can say is that I'm very grateful for all the people that helped me through that issue. If it wasn't for my coworkers, then I don't know what would have happened to me. This story is from 2017, when I was a freshman in high school and bored in class one day. I was in my third period, and I was happy I would be getting out of class later. I had an orthodontics appointment to get my braces adjusted, and my mom would be coming to the school to pick me up. The class I was in was math, and it was quite boring to me. To be honest, I was just not really a math guy. In high school, I would usually just sit and look out the window, not paying very good attention. I sat in the back corner of the classroom, which was on the second floor of the school. That's what I was doing on this day, just looking out the window. The teacher was talking about math, and I was distracted, looking out the window to the front parking lot below me. I was hoping that time would pass and I would soon be able to leave. My mom would be there to pick me up and I wouldn't have to notice all this anymore. As I was looking out the window, though, I noticed several police cars driving down the street. They ended up turning into the front school parking lot. I thought that was a little bit strange. Me looking at this was interrupted when the classroom door opened. It was a student with a pass, and I knew it was for me. The teacher paused, took the pass, and then called my name. I got up from my desk, packed up my things, and headed for the front of the class. I took the pass, and the teacher gave me my homework assignment for the day, which I then shoved into my backpack. I left the classroom and headed down the hallway. As I started walking, I got a text from my mom and saw she was there at the side door. And that's where you would get picked up from. It happened to be at the opposite end of the school, though. As I walked the empty hallways, suddenly I heard a sound come over the school intercom. I wondered what it could be. Immediately I had a bad feeling. This was all out of the ordinary. What followed was a message saying we were going into lockdown. I was still a ways from the side doors, but I really wanted to get there before I would have to stay in school. I didn't want to have to wait in a lockdown classroom and miss my orthodontics appointment. It wasn't really the appointment I cared about. If I went with my mom, I would be able to take the rest of the day off from school. Plus, I was a little bit worried about why we were going into lockdown in the first place. If it was a danger being in the school, obviously I wanted to get out of there, and fast. I sped up my walking pace as I kept going down the halls. I hadn't seen anybody since I'd left my classroom. I was hoping I wouldn't either. If a teacher saw me, they would likely make me go into their classroom. When I was about halfway to the side doors, but still upstairs, I heard the sound of somebody walking down an upcoming hallway. I didn't have to go down that hallway myself, but I had to go down one that would intersect with that one. I did not know who this was. I chose to try and avoid them. I stopped still a ways back from the corner and kind of hid behind some lockers. The footsteps got closer and closer, and I decided to move and start going in the other direction. When I started walking, though, the footsteps suddenly started going along a lot faster. I ran to the nearest corner and slipped around it. I didn't think whoever it was would chase me, but they did. I heard them still coming closer. I literally ran for the stairs and flew down them. Now I was thinking there was no way the person behind me would continue following me, but they still did. I wasn't sure who this was, but I was in real deep now. It was clear they were chasing me. I turned at the first possible place I could and went down another hallway. It was very long and straight. There was complete silence other than my footsteps and the ones behind me. I ran to get to the end of the hall, and I heard the person behind me reach the bottom of the stairs. They then started running down the hallway after me. When I got to the end, the only thing I had to do was go around the corner, then make one more turn to the side exit. As I looked back before turning the corner, I saw a random man with long, stringy black hair covering his entire face. He was wearing a black leather jacket. I had no idea who this guy was. I got even more creeped out when I saw him. I initially thought this must have been a teacher, but this was no one I knew. I turned and sprinted away. I ran all the way to the side doors as fast as I could. When I got there, I burst out of them and ran for my mom's car. I was able to make it there and get inside. I told my mom we were in a lockdown and some guy was chasing me around the school. She called the school and reported it. As we left, we saw the several police cars out front. I remembered seeing them enter the school grounds. It had to be connected. We went to my orthodontics appointment after that, but by the end of the day, I learned more details. Apparently, the man from the school was fleeing from the police. They tried to pull him over earlier, and he led cops on a big chase. After his car got stuck in a ditch, he got out and fled on foot. He ran for a while and was able to momentarily get away until he was spotted on school campus. Nobody thought he would actually go inside the school. The cops were mainly searching the area around it. Eventually, they did send some officers inside, and he was located in a hallway. Nobody was harmed, thankfully. I don't think anybody knew about him chasing me around, though. I'm glad I got away from that guy. Not sure why he was after me. I don't know if he was dangerous or what, but that's my scariest experience from high school. I used to work at a movie theater for a few months when I was younger. This was years ago now, but I sometimes still think about the crazy experiences I had. My coworkers were fun and interesting, but even more so were the customers. Our theater would get pretty busy sometimes. Most of the people were very nice, but one time I had an experience that was truly a horror story. I was working an evening shift. I don't remember exactly what time I started or got off. It was probably something like 4 to 10. Everything was going fine until around 8 p.m. or so. Things were kind of busy, and there were a decent number of people standing around in a big line. It had formed at the concession stand where I was working. Usually we had 2 lines when things were busy, and that's what we had on this night as well. I was at one line and my coworker Amanda was at the other. I served a few people when a guy got to the front of my line. He was a bigger dude with short blonde hair and glasses, asked for a large popcorn and a water cup. I told him the price, and when I did, he didn't believe me. Now, most people know that movie theater food is overpriced. I don't like it, but it's not exactly my choice either. There's a lot of people that try to sneak food into the movie theaters as well. When I worked there, I saw multiple times people bringing stuff in that they were not supposed to. But it's not like I was going to stop them or anything. It just is what it is. Well, this guy objected to the price greatly. He told me there was no way popcorn should cost that much. I was already scooping it up and filling the bucket for the guy. I said back to him that I knew the price was a lot, but that's just kinda how things were. At first, I thought he might have been joking or complaining for the sake of it. Then he said he was not paying. I finished getting his popcorn and put it down on the counter. "So, you don't want this anymore?" The guy told me to give it to him, but he wasn't going to pay for it. Surely he must have been joking, but apparently he was dead serious. I laughed a little bit and saw the guy did not have a joking look on his face at all. In fact, he seemed to be getting angrier and angrier. I told him the smaller sizes were obviously cheaper if he wanted that. He looked up at the sign and read them, then yelled at me that they were all a scam. There was a line forming of people behind him that were all waiting for their items. He continued to look at the menu and said everything on it was a scam. He started reading the prices of everything out loud. The more he read, the louder his voice became. Some of the other people standing around started to take notice. The guy then raised his hands as if to make an announcement and yelled that we were the biggest scam ever. Some people started to laugh, and others looked like they just wanted him to stop. I told the guy if he didn't want his damn popcorn, then he should just leave, because a lot of people were being held up behind him. He reached forward and snatched it, then threw it right in my face. A bunch of popcorn went flying past my head, and some of it hit me as well. I couldn't believe he'd just done that. The man then sprayed the remaining popcorn around, throwing it at a bunch of people standing around him. He then poured the rest over his own head, as to give himself a shower. He then slammed the container on the ground and rushed over to a little stand holding bags of chips. He knocked them over. and finally walked off down the hallway toward the theaters. Everyone was just standing there stunned. A few people laughed, and then some guy came over and picked up all the chips off the ground. Everything resumed back to normal. Another employee came over and started to sweep. I didn't see the guy for the rest of the night. I think I got off before whatever movie he was at finished. Looking back sometimes, I think I should have just given it to him for free to avoid all the trouble, but I do not regret doing it. The man was a jerk and looked like he was absolutely about to go off his rocker. He certainly didn't deserve anything for free. That's my biggest movie theater horror story. This happened when I finished work early one afternoon. I had the sudden urge to go for a long drive, so I went home and quickly got ready to head out. I left home by the evening. Didn't really have a destination in mind. I just hopped onto the highway and picked some random streets and roads to turn off on. I remember turning off the satellite navigation as well. I don't know what really got into me that day. I just kinda felt like disappearing. I wanted to get away from everything and go someplace new. It was a really fun and spontaneous drive. I stopped off at random restaurants along my travels, had some udon noodles that were really fantastic as well. As I moved away from the cities and towns, I saw more of the countryside, which was great to see. I saw some wild vegetables growing and stopped to look at them. They looked pretty tasty to me. I drove for a good long while, almost through 2 prefectures entirely. That was when my sense of adventure slowly waned. I checked my dashboard clock and saw it was coming up on 1 a.m. or so. To be honest, it was much later than I expected it to be. I found a roadside station along the national highway and decided to pull in and sleep in my car for a few hours. I had planned on sleeping in the car that night anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I'd even prepared to use the roadside station's bathroom to brush my teeth. I pulled the sun visors down on the windshield and used a piece of cardboard I kept in the car to block out the street light. I wedged it under the sun visors and pretty much covered up the windshield entirely. It wasn't the brightest light, but the main idea with the cardboard was to stop people from looking in at me. I managed to block everything but the rear seat window behind me. I had an idea to cover that window, though. I hung my jacket on the little hanger thing on the door and thought that would be enough to put people off from looking in on me. With everything in place and total privacy, I got ready to go to sleep. I think that because of the mood I was in, I found it really difficult to get any rest that night. I couldn't shake the lingering sense of adventure I had in me. I was completely restless. I decided to search for local restaurants and sightseeing spots as well. I was already excited to see what I could find on my spontaneous travel. That was when I heard my jacket begin to slip off the hanger it was on. It was a pretty heavy jacket, so it made a lot of noise as it slipped down. I spun around to look as it was falling and received the shock of my life. As I turned around, I locked eyes with a complete stranger staring at me. It was a man. He was giving me this emotionless, cold glare. It really shocked me to see him staring like that. It was frightening as well. I paused for a moment, staring back at this guy's pale white face. What I saw made me unable to believe what was happening. I got my smartphone out because something was wrong with this guy's face. It looked like it was kind of pulsating or morphing in shape somehow. It's hard to explain. I turned on my smartphone's flashlight and lit up the dark car. I then aimed the direction at the back window where the man had been just moments prior. The face that had been staring at me had already disappeared. I sat there for a couple of seconds in complete shock. Then I unlocked my door. I don't know if this was the best decision I ever made, but I did it nonetheless. I stepped out and looked all around. I shined the light in all directions, but I could not find the owner of that pale face I saw peering in at me. There was no one there. I asked myself who that could have been and what could have possibly happened to them. I couldn't answer that question. Though I've never been a believer in the paranormal, that is something that really made me consider alternative possibilities. To this day, I have no explanation for what I saw, nor for what was wrong with the man's face. I drove to another lot immediately after that. There was no chance I was going to fall asleep again there in that parking lot. This happened about 10 years ago. My husband and I were really into overnight trips up and down the country. Back then, we lived quite a carefree lifestyle, and I miss those nights somewhat. Not the night I'm about to talk to you about, though. We usually drove back late at night after a trip. We liked it that way, as the roads were more clear, and the night was cool and calm along the way. Eventually, though, my husband and I both needed to use the restroom, so we decided to pull into a roadside station. I think it was about 2 or 3 a.m. or so. We were in a prefecture famous for being called the Sea of Trees. It had a lot of nature and was a really beautiful place during the day, but during the night it felt really wild. The roadside station we stopped at was very close to the Misaka Pass. There's a lot of nature in that area as well, very green. The pass itself is surrounded by a forest. Because it was the middle of the night, naturally the station was closed, and there wasn't much light in the area either. We pulled into the quiet parking area, and my husband and I trotted off toward the bathrooms. There was a separate building located a little away from the stores they had there for the bathrooms. There was a light on there, but like I said before, it was a very dim light. Honestly, more than anything, it made the area look kind of gloomy. I could see some brighter light leaking out of the building, but for some reason that night, I hesitated. I suddenly got the feeling I didn't want to go inside. I didn't know why I felt like that at the time, but I guess I do now. I didn't know when I would get the next chance to use the restroom, and we were a long way away from home. It's not like I really had a choice. My husband walked off into the men's side, and I headed into the ladies'. It was very clean in there. As I was gazing around, I noticed that the ceiling between the two was joined. Moreover, there was a little gap, allowing sound to travel. That actually gave me a sense of security, knowing I was in a space kind of connected to the one my husband was in. I still didn't like being in here, though. That strange sense of apprehension did not go away. The building had lots of glass in its design, and the roof was kind of cylindrical. In a sense, it kind of looked like a mirror on its side. It's really hard to explain. The structure was a bit, intimidating. I wanted to get in there and get out as quickly as possible. There was just this weird energy about this place. All the doors to each stall were open. I didn't need to see that, though, to realize I was the only one in there that night. I worked myself up, but I couldn't calm myself down at all. All I managed to do was make myself feel nervous. I could hear the sound of my breath growing heavier. I quickly got on with what I came there to do. I tried to keep my mind calm. I sure was good at making mountains out of molehills, it seemed. While I was in there, I seemed to be completely alone. It was absolutely silent. I quickly finished up, washed my hands, and ran outside to find my husband waiting out there for me. I ran over to him. The very first thing he said to me was, "It's good you weren't in there alone, huh?" I asked him what he meant. "Well, I only say that because you didn't want to go in there. You said you were scared, so I figured you might have felt a bit more at ease with someone else in there with you." I didn't understand what he was saying. I was alone in the bathroom, wasn't I? My husband noticed that strange look on my face. He said, "What? You know what I mean?" As soon as we went into the bathroom, you must have heard those high heels coming in behind you. I mean, if I could hear it in the men's room, you must have heard it too." When my husband said that to me, my blood ran cold. As I've said many times before, I was certain I was the only one in there at the time. No one else came in, and I never heard any footsteps like my husband said. I was at a loss for words. My husband must have seen the confused and frightened look on my face because he stopped talking about the bathroom. In a much more serious tone, he said to get back to the car. He took me by the hand and led me back. Without saying a word, we got back on the road. We spent some time driving in silence, and then we started speaking again. After a few hours, we arrived home in one piece. My husband looked up the roadside station online and found out that at one time in the past, there had been many offerings of flowers and dolls in the bathroom as a kind of memento to commemorate someone's passing. It does make me wonder if I truly was alone in the bathroom that night. I don't know why my husband was able to hear what he heard, and I wasn't. Maybe I'm not so sensitive to spirits. I do remember those terrible feelings of nervousness and anxiety, though. Maybe those feelings were brought on by the presence in the bathroom with me. I don't know. We've never been back to that particular roadside station, despite having the opportunity to do so many times. I'm typing this on my phone, so sorry for the grammar or any mistakes, and for the length of the story itself. I know most other stories shared are a bit longer, so I don't know. Sorry, I just wanted to share my own. Well, I say it's mine, but maybe that isn't strictly true. I heard about this from a friend of mine who doesn't have any interest of sharing their own stories online, so I said I could do it for them. My friend's a nurse, and this happened while she was working at a certain general hospital. In this certain hospital, there was an open secret among the staff. Unpleasant things was how some described it. Others said it was paranormal activity, and others plain just didn't want to talk about it at all. Most of the alleged events happened during the night shift. It was common that nurses would get calls from empty rooms, as if someone unseen was pressing the nurse call button next to an unoccupied bed. Because of the strange phenomenon going on, the nurses asked and were granted permission to walk the wards in pairs on the night shift. This is my friend's experience of what happened when she was working the night shift that night. She was doing her rounds of the wards with a colleague when they got to a room they knew was unoccupied. Since they had been called, though, they were duty-bound to go in and check it out. They arrived at the empty room, and before they even walked into it, they knew they would find it empty. They were right, of course. They scanned the room as per the rules. It was only when they were about to turn to leave when my friend noticed something that was certainly out of place. She looked down toward the floor for some reason, and that was where she spotted something sticking out from below the curtain. The curtains were attached to rails that ran along the ceiling, the type that could be pulled to separate space for patients, a sort of room divider, if you will. There, just creeping under the curtain, in the gap between the floor and the bottom, appeared to be someone's hand. It was grasping and searching for something. My friend said the hand looked unwell. The two nurses had just looked over every inch in the room, and there had been no one in there. They were seeing something their eyes couldn't believe, and their minds could not explain. My friend isn't the squeamish type at all. I mean, what nurse is? She kept her cool and pointed out the disembodied hand to her colleague. They both quickly and calmly exited the previously unoccupied room and went back to the nurse's station. Her colleague, who by the way was her senior in every sense of the word at work and in age, told her not to worry about what she had just seen. What did she mean by that? Don't worry? Who wouldn't worry about seeing something as strange as that? My friend pressed her colleague for an explanation of what they had just seen. Reluctantly, her colleague shared some information. It said that disembodied earth-colored hands were spiritually signs of organ failure. Did they see some manifestation from a previous patient? It gives me chills to imagine seeing that grasping hand underneath the curtain that might have belonged to a previous patient who had passed away. Maybe it was a spirit trying to get the attention of the nurses in their final moments, but who can really say? I was driving home from work pretty late one night. I often worked later hours, and during this time would leave work at about 10:30, then get back home at 11 p.m. or so. My job was in the city, and I lived a ways outside of it, in a much more quiet area. After leaving my job, I would take a freeway back for most of the drive, and then exit onto a highway. Well, one time when I was working earlier, there was a traffic jam. I found a shortcut to get home a bit faster. It was a few more turns, but no stoplights at all, and in my opinion, much easier driving. Or, at the very least, driving that I liked better. Depending on traffic, it could be slightly faster or slightly slower. On a night like this, when there was virtually no traffic on the freeway because it was so late, it was probably a slower route, but I was in the habit of driving the shortcut already. The habit had started when I worked earlier shifts and got off when the roads were busy. On this night, I was taking these back roads to my house. These roads were very quiet, with some woods and occasionally the quiet neighborhood or person's house off to the side. I was probably about 10 minutes away from my own home. The roads I was driving on were really quiet, so I wasn't expecting to see any other vehicles at all. This was exactly how I liked it, really. It made for easy driving. As I was going down a straight spot in the road, I noticed something up ahead. There was what looked to be some kind of construction going on. As I got closer, I saw many orange cones and a person holding a sign on the right. It was one of those stop signs that lights up, and a construction worker holding it directs traffic to where they're supposed to go. There was a man in an orange vest holding the sign and standing on the side of the road. This was a one-lane road. There was a lane for traffic going in the opposite direction as well. However, the lane had been blocked off by two orange construction cones that were there. I began to slow down as I got closer. When I did, I was starting to wonder what exactly was going on here. There was only one person that I could see, the guy holding the sign, and no other construction workers at all, other than the few cones spread out. I didn't see any kind of work being done either. Still, I didn't pay all that much attention. I was tired from a long day at work and just wanted to get home. I slowed my car down. I came to a stop as the man held the stop sign up, and when I did, the man holding the sign started walking into the middle of the road, right in front of my car. I remember he was about average height and had long dark brown hair. When he started walking over to my car, I started to really wonder what the hell was going on here. The guy stopped about a foot away from my vehicle, directly in front of it. He was just kind of staring at me, not saying anything or communicating in any way. I was sitting there with what must have been a puzzled look on my face. I saw the guy looking back behind my car and saw something else out of the corner of my eye in my side mirror. I looked back. I saw another man, this guy obviously not a construction worker. He emerged from out of the woods on the side of the road. It was really bizarre. But even more strange was that this man was holding what appeared to be a baseball bat and was quietly approaching my car from behind. He was about 50 feet away if I had to guess. I wondered to myself what on earth was happening here. I just wanted to drive away. It seemed there was no real construction going on at all. The whole thing looked like a trap. The guy holding the sign was still there, stopping me from going forward. I rolled my window down just a crack and asked what was going on. The man didn't answer me. The other guy with the bat was still approaching from behind, and now getting much closer. I knew I needed to get out of there right now. I put my car into reverse and backed up. As I did, the man with the bat was less than 10 feet away. I veered to the left extremely fast and swerved away from the man holding the sign. He tried to get back in front of me and block my path again, but he was not fast enough. I drove away as I ran over the orange cones. Luckily, they were the smaller kind. As I sped away from the area, I saw the two men now standing together in the middle of the road. I felt lucky to have narrowly escaped that situation. Before I got home, I called the police and reported what I'd seen. I'm guessing by the time an officer got there, though, the men were already long gone. I continued to drive that same route home, even after that experience. It was just so routine that I didn't want to change it. Well, just about a week after the initial incident, I was driving home once again. It was around the same time, maybe 10:30 or 11 p.m. at night. I came up to just about the same part on the quiet road, and I could not believe my eyes. I saw the very same guy in his construction clothes, holding the stop sign again. The two cones were on the road in the exact same spot as before. How could this be happening? It was literally the exact same situation as the week prior. This time, though, I didn't slow down at all. I sped up. As I got closer, the man went to take a step into the road and started waving his arm to try and stop me. I pressed on the gas even harder. The man had to jump out of the way, and I mowed down the two small orange cones they'd put out. I kept driving as the man stood on the other side of the road. I called the cops once again. That situation made me really angry. How could the same guy be back out there in the exact same spot, doing the same trap again? I really don't know if they were found after, because I didn't hear anything about it. I didn't see them again, though. It was surely a trap. I'm not sure what the guy's plan was, maybe to steal my car, or something else. The area on the road where they had set up was a very quiet area. No houses or buildings or anything like that in the immediate area. Plus, it was a long straightaway. I'm hoping they were never able to actually stop anybody. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.